Hi, Professor Wills here. We're continuing our unit on oceanic art, and we are now pivoting to the region known as Micronesia. And we're going to spend time on an island known as Pohnpei, P-O-H-N-P-E-I. And it's there that you find an abandoned civilization. It's a city complex that's like a ghost town, but it once extended over 170 acres and had tens of thousands of people who inhabited it. It's nicknamed the Venice of the Pacific because of all of its man-made islands and multiple canals that take you to different districts in the city, where you can find places where you could worship, where you could prepare your food, maybe then canoe over to a place to get your boat repaired, to watch entertainment and perform rituals, and maybe even anoint the dead. So Nan Madol is the location we're heading to, and let's take a look at some more about it in our PowerPoint. All right, so as I said, we are in Micronesia, and Micronesia is known for its myriad small islands, and most of them are coral atolls. In this part of the world, of course, very volcanic in origin. Looking at the map here on the left, you can just see northeast of Guinea, the tiny island of Pohnpei. Originally, it was a small island, inhabited by people centuries ago, it's there that they built up the island into a larger inhabitable space with multiple acreage by creating man-made islands. So we have met many civilizations so far, particularly in Polynesia, who've used bamboo or wood or palm fronds and fibers to create, places of worship or homes, that kind of thing. But we haven't seen evidence of really sophisticated stone construction since we were in southern Africa examining the Great Zimbabwe. But you can find it here. The entire location of Nan Madol that you see here in yellow has a certain mystique because though it dates back to the 12th or 13th centuries, by the time European explorers discovered it, it was completely abandoned. So the reasons for that are unknown. There are some mythology associated with its creation and its destruction, but the real reason perhaps is much more practical, whether it was a tsunami or simply other circumstances, a disease, etc., that perhaps created a shift in its population in the reason why it was inhabited. In any event, what you find here is the building material in this very volcanic place is basalt. And we've seen that before, of course, in the sculptures on Rapa Nui, pivoting our slide here. But it was these basalt logs that were harvested using heat and water to extract them and split them. And in that process, it was a way for them to actually have these flat-sided logs quarried out of these basalt locations. So it's something that happens naturally when you heat basalt, and as it cools, it will split into these flat-sided blocks that are used for building. If you've ever been to Mammoth up in Northern California, there's a national monument known as Devil's Postpile, and you can see that naturally occurring on this cliff face with a similar basalt medium in more extreme volcanic period of California history. Heading back to Nan Madol, of course, what's also interesting is there was a great distance between the location of these little islets that they would build and where they would harvest the basalt. So, extending miles and miles away. So there is no knowledge on how they transported these huge basalt logs over, some of them as long as 20 feet. So perhaps using wooden logs. So actually it is a lush island, so perhaps tree trunks provide rollers for them to transport them, unlike, the lack of wood on the island of Rapa Nui that we learned about earlier. So there was a succession of powerful kings that ruled on Nan Madol. And what you find initially, they believe in their origin story, is that a giant temple was built. And it was on the edge of the island so that it could connect to the rising sun and the powerful forces in divine mythology associated with that culture. As continued tribute, the temple continued to be expanded, and that required creating these artificial land masses. So much like you see in Venice, Italy, as a bedrock of coral, laid upon it are courses of these basalt logs. Here's a quick image. You can see how stacked in layers they appear. Additional detail shots show you how they were layered in header and stretcher courses, meaning perpendicular to one another. So one may head in one direction, and then the next layer would be laid in the opposite direction, much like you would build with your childhood building blocks, that kind of thing. But with enough height and depth, you create these substantial islets where nature continues to grow, where they're able to create additional acreage of land masses. And also, since the primary vehicle of transportation on water was the canoe, created various canals and districts through which they were able to extend their civilization. There were even protective walls known as breakwaters to prevent, big waves from affecting the little islets that they created, and with just enough openings for the water to be refreshed, so you don't get stagnant water as well. In terms of, acknowledging the impressive feat of building Nan Madol and all of its islets and canals, scholars estimate that the weight of all that rock is 750,000 metric tons. They were probably built over the course of 4 centuries. And much like we saw in more established civilizations like Egypt and Nubia, it indicates that at least for a few centuries that they were able to spare the human labor away from, growing food and hunting towards this urban development project, a real feat in civil engineering, which indicates also that that civilization, at least for a while, enjoyed economic and political stability enough to do so. Thank you for joining me.